discuss all of this is Abdulateef Al-Mulhim. He is a columnist for the Saudi daily newspaper Yaum. He's also a columnist for the Arab press. Also joining me is Ali al-Ahmed. He is a Saudi scholar and founder of the Institute for Gulf Affairs. Welcome to both of you to the show.
Thank you.
Abdulateef, you've just left Saudi Arabia. You arrived in Washington. What is the talk about the king's health there and a possible successor?
First of all, good morning, and I'm glad to be here. It really surprises me that the talk of the succession or the transition is being talked about in outside Saudi Arabia more than it is talked about in Saudi Arabia, because to be honest with you, it's never been an issue for the Saudis. The government in Saudi Arabia and the Saudi royal family has very stable and structure, and we had 5 transitions and successions in the history of Saudi Arabia since it was established in 1932. And Saudi Arabia's succession procedure is considered the smoothest, not only in the Arab world or the Middle East, but technically in the whole world. There were no downs during any transition in Saudi Arabia. So in reality, yes, we talk about it, but we are not worried about it at all.
Right, Ali, this is a family-run concern. How significant is there any change in leadership? I mean, can we expect policy changes, or will it just be business as usual?
I wanted to say, you know, in contradictory with Mr. Abdulateef said, that we have issues in Saudi Arabia. With the first king, Abdulaziz, murdered his own brother, who was crown prince. Second king, Saud, was overthrown by his brothers. Third king, Faisal, was murdered by his nephew. So we didn't have complete stability. Transition in some power, there was some difficulties. But at the same time, I wouldn't say that this is going to be chaos. I think there will be struggles, but it will not lead to extreme conflict. This is important here. Why? Because it's different than the previous transactions. They were from father to son and brother to brother, but this time we have a diversion. We have cousins competing, and that weakens the state and their capacity to make concessions to each other. Regarding policies, I don't think the foreign policy will change very much. The Saudi state has really cemented its foreign policy during Abdulaziz's time, and it has not changed. The same policy regarding domestic policy, that depends on who's going to rule and the balances that they have to make within their, you know, it's like you said, it's a family, it's a ruling family that controls everything, dominates every aspect of life in that country. The citizenry is not involved by any means in the process. Like Abdulateef said and confirmed, that we are not talking about it because we can't. You talk about it on Twitter, but you cannot talk about it in the newspaper. There is not a single article in the Saudi newspaper saying what's going to happen if the king dies. Not the word king dies, it's not even mentioned in Saudi press.
No, I disagree. We talk about it openly.
One article.
And I wrote an article in the Arab News, and it was titled "Stability in Saudi Arabia and the process of succession." We talk about it, but the reason we don't concentrate on it, as I said, and I always concentrate, it's never been an issue in Saudi Arabia, because there is right at this moment there is an allegiance committee which would decide who's going to be next and who's going to be next. But when you talked about the transitions during the time of Saud or King Faisal, regardless what happened, that transition was very smooth. And when you look at Saudi Arabia in an area which is very unstable, Saudi Arabia is one of the most stable countries in the whole world, and this is why even during the peak of the Arab Spring, people always looked at Saudi Arabia as the deciding factor, including the United States, especially the case, for example, in Egypt or the little winds that touched Bahrain. Saudi Arabia was the deciding factor. Also, one thing, it really surprises me that talking about Saudi Arabia in the world press is what you call it, is like a fairy tale story. People like to talk about Saudi Arabia. People like to talk about the Saudi royal family. Not today, not last year, but since it was established. And we've been hearing all the talks and all the rumors and all the stories being mentioned about life in Saudi Arabia. Saudi Arabia, again, is the most stable country in the area, and nobody denies it. And this is why when economic recession around the whole world, you would see people looking at Saudi Arabia. When you see oil prices ups and downs, or instability in the oil prices, then we'll see people around the world looking at Saudi Arabia. Why would they look at a country that is unstable? I mean, Saudi Arabia has
let me get Ali's view on this. Ali, we just heard there, Saudi Arabia, a fairy tale country. This country also comes under fierce criticism from the rest of the world for a lot of its policies, its social policies, its judicial policies. It's a country where they behead people. It's a country where women are still banned from driving. Yeah,
absolutely. Look, in terms of human rights, Saudi Arabia takes the prize on this. At all levels, it really is one of the worst countries in terms of, the level of lack of human rights and freedoms. There is not a single human rights committee in that country, except, of course, the government-manufactured human rights commissions and, and centers. But the reason that country is stable is because of force. As the Al Saud always repeat, that we have taken it by the sword, and we will, if you want it, you can take it by the sword. That's why the Saudi, in terms of percentage, the Saudi Arabia has one of the highest, the largest security forces, especially internal security forces, and they sign deals after deals. One of the countries, per capita, is the highest country in terms of buying weapons and training, and billions and billions of dollars spent every year on this. In terms of the population, and I don't think Abdulateef will contradict me, at least 70%, more than 70% of the population cannot own their own homes. And this is 80 years after the start of the flow of oil. In terms of poverty, around 30%. In terms of unemployment, over 30%. Among women is over 70%. So you're talking about a crisis. This stability is really manufactured because the West supports them with weapons, with training, with political support. But this is not going to continue, especially when you have the largest ruling family in the world, and everyone wants to get a piece of the pie, of that oil pie. This deprives the population from their rights, their role in the government, and also of the wealth. Okay. So you're really waiting for, it's a time bomb that's ticking. It's different than the past. I think we will have younger generation that will demand and will take to the street and create...
and Saudi Arabia is facing new threats right now,
Absolutely.
Which didn't exist previously. Abdulateef, you say the transition to a new leader, when that happens, will be a seamless transition. There won't be chaos. What do we know about the two men in line for the leadership? We got Prince Salman and Prince Mohsin.
Let me comment about what he said. People outside Saudi Arabia, like Ali, it's very clear that he is not in line with whatever Saudi Arabia does. And we never heard him saying a good comment about what Saudi Arabia did for the Saudis or the Arab or Muslim world or the whole world. We never heard him say this.
I would say so.
And when you talk about Saudi Arabia, people outside Saudi Arabia take individual cases. Individual cases cannot be judged in the policy of a country. I cannot talk about the United States when they are, for example, busy on getting ready for the trial of the Boston bomber who is being right now on trial, and many people asking for the death penalty. So because it is an individual case. Same thing in Saudi Arabia. Saudi Arabia is not as absolute monarchy as people think. The Saudi royal family do listen to the people. And for example, when people during the rise of the Arab Spring, and it's continuing, there are so many changes in Saudi Arabia that were done, and there were many mega projects that were taking place at a time when the neighboring countries are simply in chaos, and sometimes geography would dictate your positions on many issues. For example, yes, we do spend a lot of money on what do you call it?
Weapons.
No, security expenditure, for example. But we have thousands of miles of borders, either by sea or land borders, with two very unstable countries, which is Iraq and Yemen. So it's very, 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 very important for us to protect our borders and to protect our people. And when he says that, when Ali says that dealing with people by the royal family in a
All right, let me get Ali to respond to that.
Well, look, in terms of development, I want to give another number, and he cannot contradict that. You know, the number was 60. I'll tell you because it's from Saudi.
I know, but I mean, how do you know that?
I know because it's in the Saudi press. It's not from me.
Go ahead.
This is oil in Saudi Arabia started flowing in 1934. That's now about 80 some years. Schools in Saudi Arabia, most of the schools, 60% or more of the schools that Saudi students go to are not schools. They are houses and rented apartments. This failure gives you really an indicator. In this country, this huge, the land is abound, that government failed to provide buildings to its students, to its only 5-6 million students. In terms of housing, like I said, and in terms of health care, in terms of many other development indicators.
What do you make of Abdulateef's point that in a region full of turmoil, it remains a stable country?
Well, I think that stability is because, the Gulf stability is because they have some money and they have a lot of support from the West. And the fact that they use very repressive policies. If you write something on Twitter, you go to jail and you are lashed. And if you protest, you're shot and killed. Children included. There is protests in Saudi Arabia. There is a killing of protesters in Saudi Arabia. It's not reported because the Saudis have invested in international media that's not reporting about that. And there is a Western support for the Saudi government.
Right.
It's an absolute monarchy because there is not a single voice of the people in the process. It's been at least a month now since the king has been hospitalized. We have not heard anything. We have not seen anything in terms of his health and his condition.
In terms of what may change in Saudi Arabia, and as far as the leadership is concerned, Abdulateef, are we likely to see any changes in policy in the country?
No, I don't. In foreign, you see, as I said, Saudi Arabia has very stable structure. It's not like today's king and tomorrow's king has entirely different view of the whole world. And believe it or not, when King Abdullah became a king, we always hear in the Western press that King Abdullah is not as pro-Western, for example, or progressive policies. But it turned out that King Abdullah policy became an icon for a lot of people around the world, a lot of leaders around the world. And when Ali talks about, as I said, chosen subjects, about like we have problems with the school, but with something we discuss it in every single day in the paper. But when he says Saudi Arabia, Saudi regime is using force or using money, Iraq and Iran has more money than Saudi Arabia. Iraq has a lot of water resources, a lot of oil reserves, very highly educated people. Same thing with Iran, but still you see an instability. Believe it or not, instability cannot be bought by money, and it cannot be repressed by a police way. The Syrian intelligence was the strongest in the whole world, but they couldn't control the masses in the streets. But again, I don't know why Ali, I mean, with all respect, never said that one single thing that Saudi Arabia had done is the right way.
Okay, Ali, they may not be changed from the top downwards in Saudi Arabia, but a lot of circumstances are changing, as you've talked about some of them. You have Saudi Arabia now coming under threat from ISIL. There's an unstable Yemen. The relationship between the United States and Iran is changing as well. Inside Saudi Arabia, there's a growing young population, many of them looking for jobs right now. So will change come from the bottom, going upwards?
I think part of it will come from the bottom because the younger people, in terms of social networks and opening to the world, they understand that they deserve better. And the government, the monarchy, I would say, want to take more of the country's wealth and power. So there will be a clash. Also, there is a changing world. There are now, if we could look at the Egyptians, for example, the Saudi role in the Egyptian coup and in the Saudi role in supporting terrorism in Yemen, in Syria, in Iraq, is now being felt by the Saudi government, because this Saudi dance of we are against ISIL, in fact, but at the same time, they are sending young people, and we have names and numbers on that they are sending young people to go to fight in Syria to get rid of it. So these Saudi policies are very, very skillful, but at the same time, I don't think, like they say in America, you can fool some people sometimes, but you can't fool all the people all the time. And I think that will come back to bite us.
Abdulateef, we're running out of time. I've got 40 seconds for you to respond to that.
It's a very interesting point. Ali says that Saudi Arabia is sending people to Syria. By the way, people are being questioned, even if they think about or talk about even going to Syria. But again, Saudi Arabia.
On that, and you can answer.
Saudi Arabia is more stable than what else.
We are going to have to leave with the gentleman. Thanks to both of you for joining us.